Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Everything's good? Not too hot, not too cold?
Perfect.
Did you find parking, everybody? Oh, okay. All right, yeah. You know, I was thinking on the way over here, they called me and said that the parking lot was full. I said, "Oh, my." This morning we heard that because of construction, Daniel was blocked on both ways. Actually, the police department was saying, we can't move those barricades. They belong to the city of University Park. So when Greg called me and said, oh man, one more shoe that had to fall off the foot. But then I thought, there's a couple of very famous inevitabilities that we know about, taxes and that. We should add one more to it, parking at SMU. It's just a reality. Hi everyone, my name is Hadi Jawad. I'm the co-founder of Human Rights Dallas, along with our beloved leader and friend, Dr. Rick Halpern. Welcome to all of you. Human Rights Dallas was founded just a few months ago. July 27th will be our first year anniversary, so we're not quite even 1 year old. But we have produced some significant events, made some inroads. Our mission is to build a culture of human rights in Dallas with the help of civil society, local government, and the private sector. Pretty tall order, but you have to think big. And that's one thing we've all learned from Dr. Halpern, is to think big. If you aim for the moon, you might just end up in the stars. That's the philosophy. We have been on 2 tracks in our programming. This is the 4th in series of what we call Living History. The first one we produced was in the Hispanic community at the Latino Cultural Center back in Hispanic Heritage Month last year on September 6th. And we titled the program, Struggle for Dignity in the Latino Community in Dallas. We had a wonderful event. Latino leaders showed up, wonderful discussion. Many of you that are here were there. We followed that with the same format, the struggle for dignity and human rights in the African American community in Dallas. We produced that last February at the Dallas Public Library. Again, good, well-intended, great discussion. I kept hearing the same thing over and over. I did not know that. And that's one more thing again that we learned from Dr. Halpern, is that he does not want people to use this phrase, I did not know that, as a historian. The third program we produced in the Living History series was during Women's History Month. It was held here at SMU. Some of you attended that. Another great program. So this is our 4th in the Asian American community of Dallas. The other track we're on is a documentary film series. We've shown 4 films. But I think one of the best programs that we did, which was historical in nature, because it had never been done before, was to get Dallas City Hall to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Who would have thought that that could be done here in Dallas, Texas? I mean, if you know the history of Dallas, Dallas has a very, like other American southern cities, a dark history, a very dark history. But Dallas has come a long way. We're not the city, mercifully, that we used to be. We've come a long way, but we're not where we think we should be, or we ought to be. Dallas is a good city, but it's not a great city yet. And we believe fervently that if the city of Dallas picks up the mantle of human dignity and human rights, it has an opportunity to become a great city. That's all I'm going to say before I turn this over to our leader and mentor to many of us. He has served as the chair of Amnesty International USA 3 times. He is the current director of the SMU Human Rights Program. I think this is in his 40th year or so, correct me if I'm wrong. He is recognized nationally and internationally as an expert on the death penalty. If you ever see an Associated Press report regarding the death penalty news of any sort, you will see that AP will also have, underneath at the bottom of the article, will also have in parentheses Dr. Dick Halpern. So any news about the death penalty that circulates in our country through Associated Press also has Dr. Halpern's name on it. He's also an internationally and nationally recognized authority on genocide and, of course, human rights. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Halpern.
Thank you, Hardy. Thank you all. Great to see you. Nice to meet many of you, and nice to see a lot of you again. I will be brief, just a quick item or two. SMU, however that comes to your mind with whatever the university resonates to you, it is unique. It's not unusual. It's unique in that there are over 5,000 colleges and universities in this country, and 9 of them, you can count them on both hands. 9, only 9 have an undergraduate degree program in human rights. And SMU is one of those 9. It's the only one in the entire South. This stuff should be taught at every university in the country, but it isn't. You ought to be able, any student ought to be able to go to any school from Key West to Honolulu and be able to study this pedagogy. But you can't at most places, but you can here. It's quite a tribute to the university that it is at SMU. It's not at UT, it's not at Stanford, it's not at Harvard, it's not at Yale, it's not at a lot of these hooty-tooty schools that think of themselves as national leaders in education in this country, and in many ways they are, but not in human rights. But SMU is. We are, I'll say this as a follow-up, and then I'll introduce the moderator, Stephanie Draco. The goal, in addition to Human Rights Dallas, and to help people stop saying, I didn't know. The real goal is to have Dallas become a human rights city in conjunction with UN guidelines. There are not many self-declared human rights cities in this country. There are several, but there aren't enough. And should, or dare I say, when Dallas declares that it is committed to the defense, protection, and advocacy of all people's rights in this city, whether they live here, work here, or are visiting here, or are just passing through an airport, a train, or a bus terminal, when Dallas goes on record as being a human rights city, it will be the largest such city in the country. New York isn't, LA, Chicago, none of these major cities are. But we have the World Cup coming to Dallas in particular, and this region of the country next summer. And Dallas ought to be a human rights city prior to the world getting here, and it certainly ought to be committed to human rights long after the world is gone from here and when the games are over. This is what we are committed to. My God, if Jackson, Mississippi can be a human rights city in America, then I'm hard-pressed to believe that Dallas can't do the same. So this is our goal, and we hope to see you at future events, and hope that you will be committed to this pedagogy as we make Dallas, work to make Dallas the best city that it can be. Not the city it was in 1955, and not even the city it was in 1995, but the city it is in 2025 and needs to be better. That being said, let me introduce the moderator. I'm sure all of you know, most of you know, Stephanie Drenka. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Dallas Asian American Historical Society. She previously served as communications director for Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, a major organization here. She now works with the Texas Civil Rights Project. She graduated from DePaul University with a degree in communications and minors in both women and gender studies and Asian American studies. I ask you to join me with a nice round of applause for Stephanie Drenka.
So if you are not familiar with the Dallas Asian American Historical Society, we are now 3 years old, and our mission is to research, preserve, and amplify the legacy of Asian Americans in Dallas. So before we introduce our panelists, and although this is a living history series, I don't think that we can understand the history as we're living it now without understanding where we came from, and that's kind of the premise of our organization. So when we look at the history of human rights for Asian Americans in Dallas, we have to acknowledge that we have a long history in this city. So does anyone have an idea when the first Asian American was documented in Dallas? No guesses?
1880s.
Close. So 1873 was the first time an Asian American was listed in the Dallas City Directory, but 1873 was also the first time Dallas published a city directory. So we can assume that we were here even prior to that, because Chinese laborers were the ones that built the railroad that allowed people to come to Dallas and settle here. So the Houston Central Texas Railroad Company hired around 250 Chinese laborers to build a railroad from Houston up to Dallas. So this is a picture from the Amy Carter Museum of American Art Archives of some Chinese laborers and working on the HCT Railroad. And then you can see that the railroad was what made Dallas such a bustling metropolitan area, because we, before the railroads, had no way to connect to the rest of the country. And as the Chinese laborers did their work, they were also faced with significant amounts of racism. So the Dallas Herald published an editorial in which they wrote, "We want neither N-word nor Mongolians. We want white men, men created in their maker's image." This kind of language was very prevalent across the country. This was during the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act. The mounted horsemen, or as we know them today, it evolved into U.S. Border Patrol and immigration control. They actually started at the border because they were tasked to prevent Chinese immigrants from immigrating from Mexico into the United States. So as long as we have been in Texas and in Dallas, we have faced human rights violations. This is some of the language and how we used to be discussed in newspapers. Chinamen under arrest, Chinamen sent home. So I invite you, as we're going through the panel today and thinking about some of the issues that are facing not just our community, but our fellow communities of color and other marginalized communities in this country, some of the themes that are still unfortunately prevalent today. Again, some language about Chinese laundromat owners. They were accused of perhaps contracting viral diseases, and they were run out of business. We also have experiences in Dallas with Japanese incarceration. A lot of people think about incarceration happening in Crystal City or on the West Coast, but we actually detained Japanese men and women in Dallas who were working for the Nikkei Cotton Company. And we had a site of incarceration just about 25 miles away from Dallas in Seagoville. So Seagoville, which is now a women's prison, was the site of Japanese incarceration during World War II. So you can see how close that was to us. So some of the most atrocious human rights violations that we think of happened in our metroplex as well. We're gonna get closer to the history that we're living today, and we're so excited to have Major Paul Ty here, but the history, how many of you knew that there used to be a Little Asia in East Dallas? A handful of people. Yeah, so the Southeast Asian refugees were resettled in East Dallas, and it was to the point where it was nicknamed Little Asia, and there are very, very few traces of that community left, and we're so honored to have someone here to speak on that history in person. But you can also see that where Asian Americans settled and thrived, they were also subject to discrimination and pushed out of their communities. This is an article from KERA, July 2016, which kind of documents some of the demise of the area in East Dallas that a lot of the refugees call home. We are also in a time where we're facing a lot of religious oppression and bigotry that is always tied to race and ethnicity as well. And that's not new either. So in 1984, the Dallas-Fort Worth Hindu Temple Society purchased land in Harbor, Texas. They were going to build a traditional Hindu temple, and the residents objected to the project because its architecture differed from that of local buildings. And although the Anti-Defamation League helped negotiate a settlement with the city, the community realized that they were not welcomed, and they sold the land back for less than what they paid and purchased more expensive land in Irving, Texas. Some of you are probably familiar with what's happening with Epic City right now. So again, we are not learning from our history, and we're repeating some of these patterns today. I am a Korean American adoptee, so the Korean community in Dallas is very near to my heart, and we had a race-fueled hate crime that happened in May of 2022, but because we did not understand the historic significance of the ethnic enclave that the shooting happened, initial reports said that it wasn't a hate crime, it wasn't motivated by race. Later learned that it was, and that led to the first Korean bilingual street signs in the city of Dallas, and making Dallas's Koreatown official. And all this to say that history and understanding our history has severe and profound implications for our lives today, and it's important that we recognize places, people, communities, so that we can prevent some of these violations from happening in the future. And with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and shut down the presentation so we can start the panel, because we have so many incredible panelists to hear from today. So I invite our panelists to join me on stage, and I'll introduce them. So Virginia Huang is a purpose-driven, creative innovation community leader with the focus of an intersection of art, design, and social impact work. She's the founder of Break Bread, Break Borders, a social enterprise that empowers refugee women through storytelling and culture. Chanda Parbu is the founder and executive director of Save Texas Education Fund, Texas's largest South Asian civic engagement group. Through Save Texas, she's mobilized hundreds of South Asians across Texas, helping build political power and ensure the community's voice is heard where decisions are made. And Major Paul Ty is a Cambodian refugee who arrived in the U.S. in 1981, rose through the ranks of the Dallas Police Department after joining in 1985. He currently serves as the Asian Liaison Officer and the President of the Asian Peace Officers Association. He's received over 100 awards for his public service. So we are thrilled and honored to have all of them here with us today. I'm just going to invite you all to introduce yourselves with any background information I didn't share that you feel is significant, and then also how has your upbringing or your experiences as an Asian American shaped your views of human rights? Just go ahead and say it to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Hong. Nice to meet you. I will just add that it's an honor. I was one of the recipients of the SMU Triumph of the Spirit Human Rights Awardees. So thank you very much, Dr. Halpern. And it's an honor to be here. I'm so grateful to be a part of this community. Random question, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, just, any introduction of yourself, like your personal background, and then how it's shaped your views of human rights.
I will share that my ancestors were folks who escaped from communism to take refuge in Taiwan. And so I grew up with 5 sisters and hearing stories of how my father survived the war and having to dodge shelling and being forced Japanese education. And he just turned 90 actually back in March, and but all the years of that language, to this day he still speaks Japanese fluently, even though he's forgotten everything else. And so those are the challenging things that we hear about. You know, it wasn't just rationing eggs, rice, but even soy sauce, and that was the hardship that we heard about growing up. And so it really, and my mother never got to finish elementary school. Was basically forced to quit school and actually go work and to help the family out. So a lot of that really shaped my worldview coming up in this space. So thank you for having me.
So my name is Paul Tai, and I call myself a survivor of the war. A survivor. I was born in Cambodia, and I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Killing Fields. A few, okay, pretty good. So I went through the Killing Fields, and as a child, I was about 13 years old when all that happened between 1975 to 1979. It was estimated about 2 million Cambodians was killed outright by the communists. So human rights, I couldn't even imagine the word human rights, because there's no human rights in Cambodia back then. I lost a lot of family members. Half of my family members were killed by the communists. I came from a big family, 18 of us, only 9 survived. My uncle, my aunt, my cousins, they were all taken to the killing fields, and they didn't do anything. It was just, back then, the communists called Cambodia, starting with what they call the year 0, starting everything new. Anyone who used to work for the government, doctors, soldiers, police officers like myself, teachers, students were all taken to the killing fields because the communists thought that they were corrupt, so they had to start everything new. Again, about 2 million people were taken to the killing fields. And the government back then, of course, communists could come into your house anytime, any day without any warning, and could take family members from your household, and then you don't get to see them again. A lot of Cambodians who came to the U.S. back, especially in 1981, lost a lot of family members. We had a lot of widows and widowers, and a lot of children who came to the U.S. without any parents. And we had a lot of issue in Dallas, Texas. And that is actually a long story, of course, and I won't take much of your time, but the reason why I joined the Dallas Police Department back in 1985, because when we first came, language was a problem. We couldn't speak English, and the bad elements knew that they could just prey on any new refugees in East Dallas, and then the reports would not be made to the police because we could not speak English. And of course, every night we had to to live in an apartment without AC or sometimes without heat, and then no locks. A lot of times they have to put sofa, couch, and all that to block the doorway so no one could break in or come hurt us. And so anyway, long story short, after the suffering in Cambodia, when millions of people were killed, we came to America. We were told in refugee camps that America is heaven, just like heaven. No crimes. No crimes. And he got robbed the first day he got into the U.S. So my family, my brother came to the U.S. first, and he was able to buy a small black and white TV for us, 5-inch. Never watched TV before, so I'm very happy. Oh my gosh, now I get to watch TV. Things like I Love Lucy or Bewitched, and love the show. That same day, the guy just walked in the house because we were told that America is heaven-like, no crimes, so we didn't, the lock wasn't working anyway, so the guy just walked in and unplugged the TV and took it with him. So anyway, and a lot of refugees back then too were sexually assaulted and robbed. So, and that was the reason why I joined the Dallas Police Department. Okay? But anyway, I can go on and on. By the way, if you have a chance, there's a book called Imagining America. And Linda, nodding your head, Linda may have read it. Linda and I have known each other since the 85. I'm going to tell her 85, 40 years ago. That's when I joined the Dallas Police Department. And the book called Imagining America, and a subtitle called Paul Thai's Journey from the Killing Fields of Cambodia to the Freedom in the USA. And it came out back 30-something years ago. It tells about what happened in Cambodia and my trips during the escape into Thailand, and then the cultural shocks here in the U.S., the language barriers, the unemployment, the suicide, and believe it or not, a lot of people back then in the 80s, Cambodian refugees died in their sleep. Went to sleep and were not waking up the next day. Several of them. So, but anyway, so if those of you who've seen the movie The Killing Fields, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The only thing is that the movie is not real enough. I understand it's a movie, they can't make it too bad, but we went through maybe 2-3 times as bad. With that said, I think I'll pause right here.
Thank you so much for having a platform to have these courageous conversations. We don't do it often enough. So thank you for putting it together and allowing us to have a voice at a table. My name is Jenna Barbu, and I'm the founder and executive director for Safe Texas Education Fund. The work I do is to give the South Asian community a voice and to understand where it came from. My story starts in India, where my grandfather was born. In the early 1900s, he moved to South Africa. And when we were in South Africa, it was during the apartheid years. And so both of my parents, my mom and my dad, and all my siblings were born in South Africa. What it meant is that we did not have representation, we could not speak against the government, we had to carry identity cards for curfews, we weren't allowed to have political meetings. 20% of the population was white and 80% of the population was of color, yet 20% of the population decided the power of the country. The ANC was building power in the 1960s, and one of the rules was that you're not allowed to meet with more than 10 people at a time. And so it was secret meetings, and so our business was sort of a back alley for the ANC, and Nelson Mandela used our business to actually have his meetings. Nelson Mandela got jailed in 1964, and in 1965, across an ocean, the civil rights movement right here in America was paving the way for my family to arrive. Inspired by Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, and the civil rights movement, passes the Voting Rights Act and Immigration and Naturalization Act to allow Asians to actually come over here. But this is a part of my history, it's a part of my DNA. We left South Africa in 1969, we went to Canada for a bit, and then we ended up in Texas. But the one thing that kind of lingered was being treated as a second-class citizen. While on paper, we were considered first-class citizens, society wasn't quite ready for our community to arrive. This kind of trauma, I call it our DNA. This kind of trauma is something that lingered with my dad for a long time. He would often say things to me like, "You can't do that, it's only for white people." And that's what happens when we oppress communities, when they feel like second-class citizens. I remember that I was protesting in the 1980s at my college for the UT system to divest in South Africa against its apartheid system. My dad told me, "You can't do that, that's very dangerous, you'll be in trouble." In the meantime, my cousins in South Africa were being put in jail for protesting against the government. I had friends and family that were fleeing the country because they were considered terrorists. Yet here I was in a university system where it was supposed to be the safest place in the center of safety to be able to express our views. That DNA went pushing too far. And for being seen, it stayed with my dad for such a long time, and it continued to shape who he was in America. In 1994, my dad and I were able to walk into Dallas City Hall and were able to vote for Nelson Mandela. And at that point, something lifted. And all of a sudden, he felt like he had a sense of belonging. It was a healing moment. It was confirming his humanity and that he had a sense of belonging. And that's when our DNA began to change. For the first time, my dad felt seen, he felt heard, and prompting him to help bring more people to the polls and really embracing civic engagement. And that's what brings me to the work that I do and shapes how I participate in our society. I have lived in Texas for 46 years, and I've seen the rapid growth of the South Asian population. I've seen discrimination at face value. And my work here is to change the DNA of our experiences as we feel empowered and to feel a sense of belonging.
Thank you all so much for sharing such deeply personal stories. I think when it comes to Asian Americans, so much of how we experience life and human rights and dignity is dependent on the global implications and what's happening with our countries of origins and a lot of the perceived fears or stereotypes that people hold for us because of it. On that note, I'm wondering, are there any other historical, either global or local events that have had a significant impact on you, especially in more recent years?
Oh, you go first.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of long-winded, so I'll try to make it short, but especially back, well, if I were to speak about what happened in Cambodia, I'm going to be here all night long, but back in the 80s, I don't know, y'all pretty young now. Linda, you may remember, I have to point out, but in the 80s, yeah, so in the 80s, there was 3 Buddhist monks were killed, assassinated in Phoenix, Arizona. Yes. And then a Cambodian Buddhist temple here in Dallas was burned to the ground. Kim Linan in the back, my partner over there, she knows about what happened back in the 80s. And Soksavan is also from Cambodia, but he's new to Dallas. He's from San Diego, California. But anyway, so to me that was significant, and there was fear within the Buddhist community. Believe it or not, although a lot of people now converted to Christianity, but Buddhism is almost like a culture to us. So we have gathering there all the time, and when that happened, it set fear within the community, and that because of that, it made us have a different perspective on in the country. Again, we came here as refugees. We were happy that we had life, because in Cambodia, there's no telling. Here, know that you're gonna be eating every day. Cambodia, we don't know if you're gonna be fed or not the next day, right? So here we okay, well, what are you gonna eat today? Chinese, Italian, or American, or whatever, Mexican, Cambodian, we think, are we gonna have food or not, right? So, but anyway, so events like that, it set us back and make us not believe that America is the land of opportunity, or America is the land of a country that show love. Don't get me wrong, because I'm still grateful. I'm still grateful for everything here in America. I have life now. I've been here for 44 years now, but still grateful every minute. But seeing, like, for example, what happened during COVID, nationwide, of all of the Asian being mistreated, you know, and people don't look at you like, okay, you from South Asia or you from Southeast Asia. No, whenever they get mad, it's you Chinese. Because COVID came from where? From China, right? So we all put in the same basket of, you know, I was called Chinese all the time. Well, so take it back. I have some Chinese blood because my grandparents from China. But I was born in Cambodia. My mom and my grandma on one side is Cambodian, so I am Cambodian. But anyway, people kind of lump us together. And when I was an officer, it's common for people to call me, hey, you Jack. I fought your war in Vietnam. You need to go back to China. Wait a minute, you're confused. You just named 3 countries, you know? And you're wrong, I'm from Cambodia. But anyways, something like that. And you know what, I was happy to see actually a lady, I don't remember what city now, she had a stick and she was attacking, she was fighting back. Okay, it's not good to hear stuff like that from an officer, okay? But I like it when people stand up for themselves. She stood up and she was crying, but she was, you know, fighting back. So, but again, I have to be fair and say this too, but I see reaction from the general population in the U.S., they're all supporting us. It's just only a few that are like, have that tension, have that resentment, that you are here in my country, you're here, you taking over our jobs, you're here, you're not supposed to be here, you need to go back. So again, I want to put this out, that's not everybody, just a small percentage. But stuff like that would set us back.
There were, I think, 2 major instances in my life that really come to mind. The first one, we moved to Texas like in 1979. So I was in high school, and it was about the time that the Iran hostages were taking, Iran held hostage was taking place. And to your point, they would categorize us just because we were brown and assumed that we were Iranian. And back in the old days when we would on the news at 6 o'clock and listen to Dan Rather, to give the news, we just knew as a family that the moment they were going to march the hostages across the screen, we knew to stay home. And we knew not to leave. That's the kind of fear that we had going out. We had smoke bombs thrown in our cars. We had people tell us to go back where we came from. We had ice chips thrown at us at North Park Mall. We had people tell us go back to where we came from. And again, they had no idea where we came from. Canada, South Africa, I don't know. But it was because of the color of our skin that they categorized us. And one of the pivotal moments, of course, was 9/11. And I think 9/11 was a lot of racial profiling, but it also went one step further and it created laws that disproportionately attacked our particular communities when it came to things like the airport and other ways in which we were profiled. Sometimes people don't understand the importance of understanding what those hate crimes look like and don't realize that people actually got killed. So we had a father of 2 that was killed at a convenience store. His name was Vasudev Patel, and he was a convenience store in Mesquite. We had Bukir Hassan, who was the father of 4. He was shot and killed. And then we had Rais Bunyan, who was shot, but he actually survived. And I just want to read you some of the comments that were made by some of the perpetrators because it's quite chilling. And we need to realize what kind of mental state they're in because these are the words that we hear, and oftentimes we might not hear it. But things like, we are at war, we're going to kill all you Arabs, you have no right to attack our country. And so those are things that we heard on a regular basis. I think the one thing that I wanted to mention about the 9/11 incident is Rais was here and he went on to build bridges and befriended the perpetrator. And he advocated, and I think that you all had a lot of work in that, but you know how I told you how my dad had a healing process, and it was amazing to see this healing process where he forgave the perpetrator, and he actually championed for him not to get the death penalty. But those are the 2 big instances that kind of affected our community.
So for me, I think it was a bit global and a bit personal. I grew up with 5 sisters, and it was difficult for my grandparents to accept the fact that my mother couldn't produce boys. They just kept trying for one to be mom, just didn't happen. And it was really challenging that girls are lesser than, and that was particularly how I grew up in Taiwan. And so my mom actually made my dad move away from the South and to go up north to Taipei because of living was so much higher. And so when I turned 13, when my dad lost his job as a mechanical engineer in his cement factory, it was tough raising all these girls. And how many of you have grown up in that environment or know that somehow your sister, your mother, your auntie wasn't treated the same? By show of hands. Anybody experience that? Slightly? Okay. And I just really was really grateful that when my aunt and uncle called from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and said, we're starting a Chinese version of McDonald's, do y'all want to come and help? And my parents said yes. So my 2 oldest sisters, one was already married, the other one was engaged, so they stayed in Taiwan. The 4 younger kids actually, came here to America with my parents, and that first day when we came, this is very much of what you all were talking about. It's, I remember at the LAX airport, my dad got lost, and so he asked a man for directions, and the guy said, sure, if you give me $20. Yeah, exactly. We gasp, right? We think, oh, it's a decent human thing to do to just give somebody directions. But no, this guy knew what he was up against, but basically we were trying to make the connection from LAX to DFW. And so there's a franticness in my father asking on behalf of all of us, the rest of us didn't speak English. And so my dad hands over $20 and the man basically led us around the corner and there was the gate. And that is the challenge we face every day is, where do we find this human decency? Where do we find this kindness, this compassion, this way to move forward, right? And I was fortunate that, in Tulsa, I got to go to middle school, high school, and then my parents, saw that my aunt and uncle had about 16 different franchises at the restaurant throughout the Southwest, and there was one that did pretty well in Dallas, Texas, and so I joked that I came here as fast as I could have. I'm a proud Texan, I'm a proud Dallasite, and it is definitely a grow up in, but also bigger racism, sexism, and all the injustices in between. And so at the restaurant, my mom was a chef, and I saw her, really transform lives every day, and I was too young and stupid to really realize this in the beginning, but my mom used to train other refugees, immigrants, and migrants how to cook or how to work in the restaurant industry and give them real life on-the-job trainings, workforce development training skills, right? And then she would send them on to bigger and better opportunities. And I honestly didn't know what that was like until I saw that there, the glass ceiling, or for us, the bamboo ceiling is real. When I got into corporate America, and I thought to myself, every time that my parents didn't pass a health department inspection test, when they do those surprise visits, it was because one of the daughters wasn't there to translate because of lack of language, right? And language is so important, but at what cost? And so it was, we obviously got very strategic later that, okay, which sister is gonna be at the restaurant and who goes back, and so we make sure, the restaurant was standing. But the challenge also was, my aunt and uncle, as God bless them, but the challenge also was when we got the franchise from them, all the other restaurants, we called everybody aunties and uncles, right? Even though we're not related. But, and so when we ran out of something, instead of running to Sam's or Costco or whatever, sometimes we just ran to, Uncle Norman's or Auntie Jane's and, to borrow something. And in one of these conversations, we found out that nobody else was paying their franchise fee but us, to my aunt and uncle. And so sometimes we really have to wonder, is blood really thicker than water? And how proximity is so important that we gather here today to be next to each other, to talk about this, but what are the actions that we do as a chosen family, as a chosen community, as a chosen togetherness, right? And so I think, it was a series of unfortunate events that really kind of led up to this. We definitely had, people who were unsatisfied with their food, even though they'd eaten everything on the plate. They'll bring it back and say, I didn't like this. I hated this. And I want a full refund. And then watching my mom, being so brave, and then, holding my dad or any of us back to not say anything back to the customer as they yell, go back to wherever you came from and go back to your country. You don't belong here. I don't understand why, out of all places, you come here to the United States to take good immigrant jobs, and the refugee cooks that we work with, at Break Borders often heard that from all the different war-torn countries that they came from around the world. And, these are people who didn't have a choice, right? We came because we wanted better economic empowerment, better economic improvement, but these are folks who are not just homeless, they're countryless, and getting to this place. America is like heaven, but when they're robbed of those rights, it is very challenging to sit back and not do anything. And so here we are.
On that note, I'll start with Chanda for this one. Is there any specific event that stands out to you in which human rights and dignity of an Asian American or Asian Americans here in Dallas were violated? And then, if you can, elaborate on the incident, the city's response, the impact that it had.
Yeah, thank you for that question. As I mentioned earlier, we've been here a really long time, where situation is there's like events, there's like 15,000 people at that same event. You barely know anybody, but it's not happening in one location, it's happening in like 5 different locations. But just to give you sort of how quickly our community has grown, but what has been consistent for our community is that as immigrants, we were often, whenever we were confronted, I think you kind of alluded to this as well, that whenever we were confronted with obstacles, our reaction would be to put our heads down, not cause a commotion, and just look away and really not address it. There was an incident in Plano, Texas about 2 years ago where 4 of our community members were accosted at a restaurant, and there was a woman who said, there's so many of you here, please go back where you go, she didn't say please, go back where you came from, and she had a gun in her purse, she physically assaulted the 4 women, and we were told, we did a rally against hate that next weekend, and we were told that this would be considered a hate crime in Texas, like you gotta check a lot of boxes off to be a hate crime. This was definitely a hate crime, and nothing happened. It was 8 months later, and we got Save Texas Education Fund put together a hate crimes forum where we had the DOJ, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, and local law enforcement come and speak to our community. And we asked very abruptly, like, we're really shocked that this happened 8 months ago. Why did we not get a conviction? Ends up that they closed the case. And I don't know if it's because they thought we were a timid community and we wouldn't do anything, but we demanded that the case be opened again. Again, a couple of months passed, and then as an organization, we went to the district attorney's office, the mayor's office, and said, we are one of the fastest growing minority populations in your area, and we demand justice. And if 2 years had passed, then that case would have gone, would have just been closed. So 6 weeks before we were able to get a conviction, and I think that's, one of the things that we definitely need to address is when our community is inflicted with these types of crimes, do we have the infrastructure to put together to make sure that we get justice and to be able to speak up, and also just making sure that our community feels empowered to actually speak up and claim justice for ourselves.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you shared, does everyone remember that Pizza Joint? What happened? Okay. How about, do you all remember the Allen shooting? Okay. Thank you for holding the visual for the communities together for that. And I think I also chatted with community members, and there were folks that said, well, Virginia, this hasn't really been defined as a hate crime yet. And I said, don't you think maybe the parameters for a hate crime might have to change if that is not exactly a hate crime? And to settle for that status quo, right, is tough to swallow. And I think for us, when I lost my mom to cancer about 10 years ago, she was just such an amazing North Star to me. She still is to this day. And when I think about, when something happens in the community, I think about what my mom would do, right? The first thing she would say is, just whatever you do the right thing, and be a good neighbor, and try and practice kindness and compassion every day. But sometimes, it's a little much. And so I remember when she first passed, I wanted to do something to honor her legacy, and I pitched the idea of Break Bread, Break Borders, which is just me, this Taiwanese girl, wanted to cook with a bunch of refugee women from war-torn countries, and people thought I was nuts. I mean, maybe there's a little nuttiness to me, but yeah. But I love how bananas a lot of people thought I was. I pitched it as a project for food for thought, and organizations kept discounting it. No, this is never gonna fly. No, that's a terrible idea. No, nobody wants that kind of, thing around here. Oh, somebody else is doing that. This is nothing, blah, blah, blah. And it took the administration at the time, years later, issuing an executive order of the travel ban. Does everybody remember that? Okay. So there were chefs that were cooking for folks who were protesting at the airport. And I remember thinking, wow, that woman has a lot of guts. I want to partner with her. I want to partner with this amazing chef. Has anybody heard of Cafe Momentum, the chef that works with, youth that are coming out of juvenile detention systems? And so Chad Hauser actually just got the James Beard Award for humanitarian award, if anybody has heard that. And so he was basically the first one to say, listen, you're not nuts, you are not bananas at all. Like, this is a great idea. Let's stop talking about it. Let's just do this pop up and see what happens. And so we invited a bunch of our friends. Cafe Momentum wasn't open on Sunday nights, and so he got a couple interns to come and help serve people. The two ladies, one from Iraq, the other one from Syria, got to boss this chef around. And I remember Chad saying, Jenny, I haven't been a fry cook for like 15 years. It's really nice not to be in charge of the kitchen. And it was really fun to see them like be in their element. You know, all the groceries were paid for, and you know, not only did they cook for folks, they shared their oral history, and they actually, you know, shared their recipes and their food, their culture with people in the room. They didn't just hide in the kitchen, they got their own mics and they used their voice. And so many people didn't ask them that along the way, you know, when they were escaping war-torn countries and being refugees abroad and then coming here to America and then, you know, cooking with Great Bear Borders. That was something that was so uniquely us that they got to share their storytelling. And that's the thing, you know, I think for that moment, for me to understand that as a social practice artist, as a social entrepreneur, and as someone, you know, who is a social justice warrior, if you will, when my community asks me for fire, I cannot bring them water. And so this was basically what the community needed, and that together people started asking, how can we get this food? How can we, you know, get it for my birthday, my wedding, my company, my conference, my, you know, whatever, insert gala occasion, right? And I still remember there were so many events that, you know, we would hear people in the background saying, why are there terrorists serving us? You know, because these are women in hijab. And they're, you know, people sometimes would openly ask and say, you know, why are you taking good American jobs? And then, we actually had senators and Congress people attend a particular event afraid to try the food. And one of them was courageous enough, after hearing the women's stories, their personal stories of survival, walking through deserts, you know, barefoot, pregnant with 4 kids, and you know, no food, no water, surviving that journey, right? And you know, after hearing these stories, and finally, they you know, this person comes up to me and openly admitted that I didn't know what to think of, you know, of this food when I walked in, and I honestly was afraid to try it. But after hearing these women's stories, that they're really no different than anybody from my family, and honestly, one bite into this rice took me all the way back to my grandmother's kitchen, her dirty rice in New Orleans, and it really touched my heart, because you know, these are people who are making laws and policies around, you know, refugees, immigrants, and migrants, and never in a day had they met another refugee, immigrant, or migrant in person in life. And so for that encounter to happen, for that advocacy to happen, and to Trojan horse it and food, was super fun. So, yeah, so thank you for asking that.
I remember when we had the vigil after the Allen shooting, you all provided food for us, so thank you for that.
You can't go fight the good fight and get the good trouble on an empty stomach.
I
haven't eaten yet, of course.
Major Ty, you know, either in your personal experience or through your work at DPD, have you witnessed or encountered cases where human rights violations happened against Asian Americans in the city?
Well, you know, back again, I do want to touch on the fact back in the 80s when the Buddhist temple was burned down, and there's a lot of letters being sent to the temple. But, you know, you need to leave this country, and there's no room for Buddhism and such, and you need to go back to your country, right? And also, the second, to me, incident that's been on my mind too is what you have on the slide a while ago too about the 3 ladies at the Korean hair salon that were hurt. And the Dallas Police Department put together a town hall meeting in the Korean community, in the Harry Hines Royal community, and had the complainants, the victims, there at the meeting too. Back then, of course, she was wearing the mask and all that, but it was horrible to see the victim at the town hall meeting and family members who were so afraid, and they didn't have much trust in the justice system, or didn't believe that the police could do anything. So I, to be honest with you, I was happy that the Dallas Police put together that town hall meeting and Office of Community Affairs. I have some friends here, Denise Moreno, raise your hand, Dr. Chen, Yon in the back, raise your hand too. So they put together a town hall meeting and had the chief of police there and had even the city council members out there to ease the community, to ease the pain. At least they were able, the victims and the families were able to see representatives of the Dallas Police Department, the city councils, and some politicians, lots of politicians out there too, by the way. But it helped to see that, to reassure them that hatred or hate doesn't have any place in our society. And that we came together, not just the police department, even social workers, groups, volunteers, agencies were all out there meeting. It was crowded, and everybody expressed their feelings of not supporting hate anywhere on earth, actually. So it was good to see the community coming together. Again, people were still hurt and all that, but at least it shows that we were together. And I remember the victim herself spoke, and she was so appreciative. One of them was there, and she was so appreciative of all the support that was shown to her by a lot of people attending meetings in that town hall meeting. By the way, thank you all so much for attending this meeting too, because you all taking the time to be here to listen to us, to learn about what happens to me. Y'all care. Y'all could have been home watching Netflix, YouTube, or what else? But y'all chose to be here, so thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Happy HPI.
We've talked about a couple instances, hate crimes, human rights violations, and I think, when there is a lot of it's a long process for something to be deemed a hate crime, but the reason that they're treated as such is because hate crimes are different than, a crime against an individual when it's motivated by racism or by bias. It's because it sends a message to an entire community that you are not safe, that you don't belong. And so the response has to be equally significant to confirm that the community is safe and is protected. So all of these examples, it's very, very important that we name them as hate crimes and hate incidents when it is motivated by racism. A lot of these things happened, prior years, but I'm curious to hear from each of you what ongoing issues or causes are impacting your community right now. What are some of the most resonant issues? There's clearly a lot going on in this climate. I'll start with Gina.
Deep breath. I think food insecurity. This is something that our refugee, immigrant, and migrant community already experience as people of color, and because we're Asian Americans, it's often overlooked. So, y'all, Texas has surpassed every other state in the nation in food insecurity crisis. We have surpassed even California in this space. So there's over 5.4 million people who are experiencing food insecurity, food desert, food apartheid, however you want to put it. And a third of that is our children who are experiencing this. And so for Asian Americans, there's only studies from Feeding America, map the meal gap for the nation. There's not enough studies here in Texas of the Asian American population experiencing food insecurity. And so people going hungry, this is actually worse than the pandemic now. So for our AMHPI community, about 1 in 18 Asian Americans are experiencing food insecurity, and for Pacific Islanders, it's 1 in 5. So a lot of the folks from Bhutan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Myanmar are kind of up there in these crises, right? And because in comparison, even just last year alone, in 2024, the average grocery cost went up about $1,040 per household, okay? And so that just makes, not only food inaccessible, difficult to afford, but also culturally appropriate food and produce even more and more difficult to acquire. And so every time that we go to this grocery store, we reach for that, fresh bok choy or whatever. Like, think about that. It's, I think, it devastates me because we talk about this. That's our love language. I don't care what language you speak, but if you don't speak food, I don't know. Like, my mom always talked about, it's such a wonderful universal language, right? It is such an incredible bridge builder. I don't care what happens, and anytime you can sit at a table and break bread with somebody, you can break down borders at the same time. And and even with the Dallas Asian American Historical Society, with the Leftover show, like, I used to joke, like, either my parents were going to pick restaurants or dry cleaners or laundry, like, but it was one of these things that, was gonna kind of keep us going. But the thing is, the love language was always, have you eaten yet? How, what are you doing about dinner? And like, anybody who's had a parent or a loved one cut fruit for you knows, like, what that's like. My son will be like, this is like a work of art. I'm like, yes, it is. Don't eat it just yet. Mommy put a lot of love into this. We'll take a picture together and celebrate it, and then yes, okay, go ahead and consume it. But every time when you eat and you're able to feel that labor of love, that's something, that I think everybody should have equal access, to celebrate that every day. And so that's a huge challenge in our community.
I think I read recently, it was the UN had proposed that food be considered a basic human right, and
Yes,
the US was one of
absolutely, yes.
US was one of 2 countries that voted against that. So
That was what the ambassador actually was working on internationally, and it kept getting shot down. It was really challenging.
Sandra?
Thank you for sharing those statistics, because that's alarming. I had no idea.
Yes.
So my resource that I'm hoping that we can get is data, because data equals resources. And so I started my organization 8 years ago, and I said, I wanted to start a South Asian group, and people just kind of ignored me. There's not that many of you. And they told me there were 10,000 of us on the voter rolls, and I said that was wrong because 800 people came to my wedding 30 years earlier, and the math wasn't adding up. So we think that number should be closer to 500,000, and we have a good portion of those people already registered to vote. That actually gives us a seat at the table, and people are now wanting to understand a little bit more about our community. But it also goes back into hate crimes. Again, we come from communities, immigrant communities are less likely to report hate crimes, and if you don't report them, then nothing's gonna happen. I think I was on a Zoom one time, and the reason we don't invest in hate crimes in Texas is because there's not that many of them. I think that's wrong. So it really is something that we're working on at our organization, is really building a database and building a trust factor so that people do come forward and report those hate crimes, because then once we can acknowledge that they're happening and create some databases about it, then we can actually get the resources. So I do believe that having systems in place and getting data, whether it's about food shortages within our own community, or in my case, we work on civic engagement, but having those numbers, in anything that we do, having those numbers are so critical and important for us to get the resources.
Stop the AAPI hate, which was behind so many of the important reports during the anti-Asian hate incidents during COVID, announced that they are suing the current administration because they lost the funding that they needed to do this important work. So I think it just shows how important that data is, that some people want us to not have access to the resources that provide those numbers. So very important. Thanks for that. And Major Kai?
So to me, you mentioned about COVID again. Although COVID occurred 5 years ago, but it still has the effect on us negatively on the Asian community. Again, it came from China, but now we all suffer for it. Although again, 5 years ago, we still hear about it. Nowadays, there's still tension. And the fact that, I'm not a politician, but the fact that I hear President Trump or politicians talk about, the war between now the U.S. and China, and the tariff war, and TikTok and all that, it's just like, it doesn't help. It's just creating more tension between Asian community and the general population. So to me, you can get a break, just keep hearing stuff, the same thing over and over. So that's why I'm so grateful that the two organizations put together this forum. I think it's very, very helpful, very useful, and I'm hoping that we'll do this more often and reach out to more people.
We're seeing a lot of, I don't think that history necessarily repeats itself, but we see really clear echoes of it. And some of, even I'm thinking about SB 17 and the original alien land laws. Now we're preventing people from China and Iran and North Korea from owning property, and it's perpetuating this idea that we are threats and that we don't belong and we don't deserve to have a place and build our homes here. So all of these things are so prevalent, not only in history, but today. because even history and stories are being censored or prevented from being taught, I'd like to ask all of you, what stories or advice do you have for future generations? What do they need to know?
Oh my goodness, use your voice. I think, you know your best storytelling, and you're depriving the world of your brilliance if you don't share your personal experience. Your lived-in experience is expertise, and I think Ocean Vuong is one of my favorite poet, author, writer, and he has a new book out, Emperor of Gladness, and the way he puts words into motion is just, it's such a beauty, and I love that he's sharing our stories of survival, stories of success, stories of all stories, and I think absolutely must use your voice.
To me, you mentioned the word history repeats itself. When I went through the communists in Cambodia for 4.5 years and watching the suffering, witnessing the executions, watching siblings die of starvation, and working under stress, under pressure, with having soldiers pointing guns at us all the time while working. No holidays, no weekends. We had to work every day no matter rain or shine, to earn ration of food. To me, and then the killing, when I found out, I was naive when I was a little kid. I couldn't understand why, when I found out about what happened to the Jews, the Holocaust. And I was thinking, how could the world allow something like that to happen again? 4.5 years in Cambodia under the communists, 2 million people were killed by the communists. So my word to everybody, this generation, the younger generation, is please do something about it. Don't just stay silent. Please. And I understand, from time to time I hear about people complaining, we can't even take care of ourselves. Why are we sending food to other countries? Why are we helping other countries? Well, you know what? America is a great country. America represents life. America represents freedom, opportunity, and all that. Yes, it is okay to share food. Yes, it is okay to help, like Ukraine or Cambodia or Somalia or any other countries that need help. So I'm very proud of America for reaching out and helping out. I wouldn't have been here if America didn't reach out to refugees. I would have been stuck in Thailand and sent back to Cambodia, because thousands of Cambodian refugees were sent back to Cambodia. And I would have been here, so I'm very grateful, and I owe to the government, and I'm grateful every single day. And I want to say that, yes, please remember, you are younger generation, and again, I'm proud of y'all here today, because y'all care. That's why y'all are here today. And yes, you are doing the right thing. Speak up, see something, say something, and speak out for people. Those who are vulnerable, they need help. They can't speak for themselves. They can't take care of themselves. So here we are. It's up to us to determine, to ensure that something like the Holocaust won't happen again, so history wouldn't repeat itself.
I have 2 words. It's ancestry and solidarity. I wrote a little statement, so I'm going to read it out because I don't cry, but I read it up real easy. To all the young people in the room, you are not standing here by accident. You are here because your ancestors brought you here. They crossed oceans, endured injustices, fought for dignity, and their courage lives inside your DNA. From Gandhi in India, Mandela in South Africa, Dr. King in America, they fought for your dignity, liberty, and for the right to be heard. From Bhagat Singh, who challenged racist laws for South Asians in America, from Wong Kim Ark, who fought for birthright citizenship in the United States. They are all a part of our lineage, and that guides us to this moment. Their resistance runs through all our veins, our DNA. Our lived experiences of exclusion, resilience, and joy are all the compass of the future. What will you do to break the bonds that rob us of our dignity? Because while our DNA carries history, it can also be changed. That change starts with you, and it starts with you today. We don't just carry history, we are history in motion. So I ask you today, what will you build today? Who will you stand with? Who will you stand beside? How will you make sure that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same fights? How will you change your DNA? Let's honor our ancestors by continuing their work, their boldness and love with each other. This moment is now, the future is ours, and let's build it together.